am Jeremy Prince. I'm the Museum and Exhibitions Manager here at the GLBT History Museum. So welcome. Thanks for coming out in one of the rainy nights this month. So tonight we are here to learn about how Hollywood has misrepresented homosexuality. I think it's a great place for this kind of discussion to put in a bigger perspective. We all know this stuff still goes on anytime you watch really any movie on this subject. I'll just briefly introduce Jim so we can get this underway. So Jim Van Busberg is an author, professional group facilitator, and film buff. Among his books is Celluloid San Francisco. That's it.
Thank you for reading the short bio. And the hat I'm wearing tonight is group facilitator, and you're the group. So it's not like I'm going to stand up here and tell you this, that, and the other thing. We're going to have a discussion about this, that, and the other thing. So the way it's going to work is, this is Jenny Olsen's Homo Promos DVD that came out in '94. If you haven't seen it, get it, it's really fun. And what I've selected is a bunch of pairings of trailers that she has compiled. So I'll show a couple of trailers, and then we'll talk about where we were when we saw it, or how it depicts whatever it depicts. So the first pair will be Victim and the Children's Hour, and then we'll move through. So I have, those are sort of the introductory ones, and I have a pair about specifically lesbian depiction, gay male depiction, bisexuality, and transgender. So those will be the categories. So what I'll do is show a couple of trailers, and then come back and we'll talk, and then I'll show more trailers, and it'll just go back and forth, which will probably drive Connie nuts. But, so let's see if I can get this to work. So I'm going to turn this off.
Drama of the most untalked about subject of our time.
Barrett, if I hear from you again, I shall inform the police. Do you understand? That's absolutely final.
You look at me as if you hate me. That's a very good guess. For God's sake, get out! I like it. I like it. Yeah. Somehow.
That's not possible, sir. Barrett hanged himself in his cell this afternoon.
For the first time, a forbidden theme becomes electrifying drama. Victim is a dynamic exposure of those who lay bare the innermost secrets of the heart, the darkest recesses of the mind.
All you have to do is to watch. Watch for fear. Fear is the oxygen of blackmail. Barrett was paying others. Find me one.
You know, I could do a lot of damage here, and you wouldn't have much to sell. All I want is the answer to a simple question. What did you tell Mr. Melville Farr?
What crime linked an aging hairdresser and a famous star of the theater? They are all victims. Victims of what? A famous lawyer's greatest battle to smash the most dreaded blackmail ring of all, at the risk of losing the woman he loves, and the total ruin of a brilliant career.
Over here, Mr. Farr. Well, the question is how much? Don't push, Mr. Farr. Don't push. We say when.
What sinister shadow from the past now falls between husband and wife? Revealed as never before, the weakness of the flesh, the strength of the spirit.
that you want to know. I shall tell you. You won't be content to hear, will you? Till you ripped it out of me.
Just when we're getting on our feet, you're ready to let it all go to hell. What? For God's sake, do you expect me to give up my marriage? This is our lives you're playing with. That's very serious business for us. Can you understand that?
I can understand that, and I can understand a great deal more. You've been playing with a lot of children's lives. That's why I had to stop you. I know how serious this is for you, how serious it is for all of us.
I don't think you do know.
You came here to find out if I made the charge. I made it. I don't want you in this house.
Ask her again how she could see us.
I was leaning down by the keyhole.
There's no keyhole on my door.
But
There is no keyhole on my door.
So, I heard you ask Peter, Victim was 1961 and Children's Hour was 1962. Actually, Victim was released in the UK in August of 61 and not in the US until February of 62, so they're pretty much parallel. Victim is British and Children's Hour is Hollywood. Victim was the first English language film to use the word homosexual, but it also used the abnormality, the condition, queer, and invert. And it was refused a seal of approval from the American Motion Picture Production Code. The Children's Hour, which of course is based on William Hellman's 1934 play, in which Martha shoots herself rather than hangs herself, was inspired by the 1809 true story of two Scottish school teachers whose lives were destroyed when a student accused them of a lesbian relationship. In the Scottish case, they won their suit. That didn't change the devastation of their lives. What's interesting is, so in 1934, one of them needed to commit suicide, and that didn't change in 1962. So that was almost 30 years. I was watching, I guess, the documentary Celluloid Closet. How many of you have seen that recently? Oh, that was good. So you know it holds up really well. I saw it back in the day, and then I was rewatching it in preparation, and I was blown away at how relevant, timely, how things haven't changed all that much. But Shirley MacLaine was interviewed, and she said that she and Audrey Hepburn never talked about their characters' alleged homosexuality. And in fact, she shot a bunch of scenes where she was, that would sort of, I don't think there was dialogue, but she would be ironing Audrey's dress or whatever. And I guess, according to her, William Wyler got cold feet and cut out all of those subtle little indications that at least Shirley was in love with Audrey. So, what's your response to these two trailers and its depiction of Janet?
I remember the fear. I remember how creepy and dangerous it was. I was yeah, it was fucking.
Yeah.
Well, if I was born in 1945, I probably saw the Children's Hour in theater in 1960.
Boy, you have aged really well.
And my surgeon, not me. No, I saw the Children's Hour when I was in college, and I just graduated recently, and I went immediately from college into being a preschool teacher, which I'm sure you can tell looking at me. I was a preschool teacher for a little bit, and I think the one thing that movie really got right is the fear that still persists to this day when working with young children. I'm sure it's different for me as a lesbian woman than it ever would be for my gay male coworkers, but the fear that children, when angry, could invent something that could not just undo your career, could undo your world. And that was the whole crux of the Children's Hour, is that these two teachers we're pretty sure roommates, friends, and then a little girl gets angry because she feels like she's being unfairly persecuted by this teacher who tells the headmaster that they've started a lesbian affair or something like that. And that fear is alive and well in my body today, despite it being
Boy, that's powerful.
Sure. That was my reaction.
Okay.
I never saw the Children's Hour. What I did see was the 5 lesbian brothers parody of it. So to me, and this is just an effect of being in a bubble and not being in a bubble, I guess, that's hilarious. And like I look at that trailer and it's hilarious because it's overblown too. And also I just love the way they do these trailers where you're just guessing it. I mean, if you don't know, you're guessing. You have no idea what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in 1961 and you're like a kid, or I don't know if you would have seen a trailer like this in a theater, what the rules were, but you would have no idea what was going on.
Well, and that's an important theme that's going to be developed in some of these other trailers, where there's, the music is so dramatic and it's something shocking happened, but we don't really know what it was. So it's just about instilling, I guess, fear and or curiosity, and of course they want to sell tickets. They want you to come to the screening. Any other thoughts or reactions, Scotty?
Yeah, having been born in the 40s myself, a great deal of the message was, the gay people are criminals. And if you're gay, you have to not let anybody find out. So it was so repressive and kept everybody in the closet. They were just scared to death that a relative or a friend or somebody at school would find out. And that was the message that these videos were.
Right, so you were subject to blackmail or worse.
Yeah, or worse.
Warren, what were you going to say?
I think what's important about these two films is that they were among the first to actually say, homosexuals exist. And that, that was part of the whole change that was happening in the 60s. I mean, advice and consent is another part of that period.
Well, and I think that's another really good point, which we will see, because prior to this, we didn't have, what do I want to say, overt representation. So if you can't see yourself, you kind of subvert the narrative. But here, we're seeing ourselves on the screen, but how are we depicted? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, oh wow, there's somebody who's sort of like me, I hope not. Yes?
So I think it's interesting because I felt actually, I never saw Victim, but that in actuality, both of them, I had a sense that the gay people that were presented, you, as an audience member, I felt sympathetic to. Even if I wasn't queer, feeling sympathetic to them being victimized by these other people.
That's interesting, because something I read was, so these were intended for mainstream audiences. They weren't, and they were sort of social issue films. And it seems like implicit in them is, how should we, meaning society at large, how should we react to or think about them? and the them is us. And so there's kind of a parallel universe going on. Oh, they're disgusting and they're sick and they're perverted, and yet we're having a different response. Oh my gosh, morning.
Yeah, I'm not sure of this, but I think Victim helped decriminalize homosexuality.
Yes, I think you're right. Yes.
I was wondering specifically about where this fell within, I know it came after the Wolfenden report, but I was wondering if the decriminalization happened after Victim. And then I have another question, which is, do you know whether both of these films were condemned by the Catholic Legion of Decency?
Everything was condemned. Does anybody know? I don't know.
Sure, they got a C.
Yeah. My notes say that the British Board of Film Censors thought the Victim was highly controversial. But I don't know specifically about the different governing bodies.
Yeah, I think Victim, you said it was 62?
In the U.S.?
Yeah, so it would have been almost simultaneous with the publication of, now I'm forgetting his name, Peter Blank's book called Against the Law, which was his confessional. Basically said this is the story of a homosexual who was imprisoned, and this is wrong. But it took 5 years for the Wolfenden Commission to actually have their report adopted, because I think the UK didn't decriminalize until 1967.
That sounds about right.
But
the
in
seed was
the air.
planted, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I was just struck in a way, like Victim is in this case the victims of blackmail, not necessarily it's a double-edged thing. It's like, yes, we want to sympathize with these people who are being portrayed because of their homosexuality as against the law, but on the other hand, it's also basically saying, you know, the crime here is this vicious rumor that they're being blackmailed with.
Right. Yeah,
Who made the movie?
So Victim, oh my gosh, I don't have.
No, was it like, was it someone who's gay, or what was
No.
the intention?
Was it Basil too?
Monica will
Am I
know.
right?
I don't know. I don't have my
That's
notes.
a guess.
No.
Okay.
Not sort of mainstream. A couple later are going to have gay creators behind the camera, but in this case, I don't think so. Warren?
Yeah, this something that was said reminded me. I saw The Legend of Lila Claire when it first came out, so but I think that was what, 69, something like that.
Yeah, that's not one of the ones we're going to see.
Anyway, but one female character in that, she's making a comment to two guys, and she said, you should, basically she says, you should go to Britain, it's legal there, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yes.
Oh, the person in the front, who I hope turns to me so I can wave. What you were just saying, I agree with. I think that if you watch it, me watching it as a lesbian person who did school teaching, I feel a very different way about the characters than a straight audience member in 1961 watching it and felt sort of their empathy was that these poor people have been victimized by this atrocious label that's been put upon them. And the tragedy is not that a queer person hangs themselves. The tragedy is that these poor people were subjected to this child's vicious rumor and they had to hang themselves because they couldn't take that stigma. It has nothing to do, I think, at times with the plight of queer people. It has more to do with the plight of someone being subjugated by that.
Well, and that's a good point, because I don't know, somebody can confirm this or not. I heard that this was an allegory for the House Un-American Activities investigation of, are you now or have you ever been a communist? So, but given the fact that she wrote it in 34 and that it was based on a much earlier case, I don't know what that may or may not be there. Scotty, and then let's go on to the next set.
Yeah, The Victim is a little different from the Children's Hour and a number of other, like Suddenly Last Summer, in that it specified that this was homosexuality. The Children's Hour, I think even in the promotional pieces, they said that the sin was so terrible you couldn't mention it.
Right.
So it didn't really identify the people who were gay. They were aware because it was a coded thing. But so many other films by the ones with Tennessee Williams wrote and things like that, you really didn't catch it unless you were in the in.
That's a really good point, because I was looking at the poster campaign, and the one word that just stood out was different.
Okay.
And so, oh, well, what does that mean? How different? So let's go on to the next pairing, which is The Killing of Sister George and a box. Let me see if I can-
Now be a big girl and close your eyes. Go to sleep. Close your eyes.
Your legs are unusually white, luminous white, luminous white.
Why do you always have to be so hysterically suspicious?
Because you're a bloody little liar, that's why.
It's not my fault if you're going to lose your bloody stupid job.
Kindly keep your foul-mouthed recollections to yourself. And remember who pays the rent here.
I'm not married to you, George.
There is not enough kindness in the world, sir.
How wonderfully cheerful you look buzzing around on your bike.
Well, you'd look cheerful too with 50 cubic centimeters stopping away between your legs.
No doubt.
See if I can.
Not all girls are raving bloody lesbians, you know. That is a misfortune that I'm perfectly well aware of.
George, impossible.
Why don't you try Mrs. Croft? If you lose your little girl, it's because you're a dreary, inadequate, drunken old bear. Look at yourself, you petty old duck. Down. Sit. Stay. Really, can't you see you're just torturing the poor child? That so-called child you've got there's a woman. She's 32. She's got an abandoned daughter who's almost old enough to be of interest to you, Mercy, dear. I'm sorry. I really am.
The story of 3 consenting adults in the privacy of their own home. The killing of Sister George.
Not even you, Jill. Oh, yes, it always comes back to me, doesn't it? Well, all right, then, let's forget it. He'll be gone tomorrow. Good. That's not soon enough for me. I hate the sight of it. Do you? I'm not so sure.
D.H. Lawrence is the author who first proclaimed the sexual revolution of our time. Now his masterpiece lives for today on the screen. The Fox.
Oh.
Any reactions to that?
That's a classic lesbian pulp in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, indeed. So once again, we have 1968 British, Killing of Sister George, which is actually an adaptation from a 1964 play by Frank Marcus. And then the 1967 The Fox is actually a Canadian production. I have a funny story about the Killing of Sister George. I was working in a movie house and I was tearing tickets and I had to check everybody's ID. It was 16, but it was X18. So are you, and I have to see your ID, I have to see your ID, I have to see your ID. And then once everybody was in, I went in and got to watch the movie. So I made me the lesbian I am today. I just thought I was so special.
What did you think of it at the time?
I don't know. I think I was so, it's so big. But one of the things, what did you think about the trailer? Because one of the things I noticed was, so there's this explicit lovemaking scene going on in the background over which, or inset into, is what we're supposed to be watching. So there's tension going on all the time. How did that work for people? Did it make you want to see the movie, or
It was
like
tease.
a real tease?
It's a little distracting.
Yeah, get out of the way.
You know, it kind of reminded me a little bit where I'd seen it in a way back when, and it was like, oh my God, like when I was 18 or whatever. And, but I was thinking of the bitter tears of Petra von Kant, and this idea of men writing women's, lesbians' lives. And it seems like, you know, it's almost like this kind of genetic quality where it probably should have been drag queens or something instead of women. You know, I was kind of just,
that's
that
an
kind
interesting,
of,
yeah.
because, you know, I haven't seen it since, it's been at least, you know, I was that age, maybe 10 or 12 years.
Did you have the Fox?
Yeah, honestly. It was like 30 years ago that I saw it. Killing Sister George.
Yeah, well, in some way, well, they were certainly stereotypic. That's interesting.
On the, yeah, I remember, so bitter tears of Petra von Kant, but what's the trope, the men ruining?
Well, it just seemed, it's often been said that, you know, several of the Fassbinder films, that many of the women should, you know, are just like, more like drag queens than real fleshed out women characters or the sensibility of Fassbinder. And so this was like based on a play by a man.
Mm-hmm. And the D.H. Lawrence novella.
Yes.
For the Fox. So, yeah.
And then also there was the famous D.H. Lawrence, you know, film with Alan Bates and Sir.
Yeah, Women in Love.
Women in Love, where they have, and which was not. It was talked about as like as if that there was it wasn't gay.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody, I mean, we all ran to it.
And remember who wrote the screenplay for that?
Yes.
Larry Kramer.
Oh my God.
So.
Seriously? Larry Kramer?
Seriously.
Are you kidding?
That Larry Kramer. So let's go on to the next pair. Notice in the band that some of my best friends are, and then we can compare and contrast boys against the girls. I think it's
when they landed on Plymouth Rock. If today any shot they should try to stem, instead of landing on Plymouth Rock would land on them.
Hey everybody, game time.
In the olden days, a princess hockey was looked on as something shocking. Now heaven knows, anything goes.
I'll be your topless cocktail waitress.
Well, Harold, happy birthday. You're just in time for the floor show.
From me to you, darling, how do you like it?
Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Harold.
Thanks, Sonny. Do you live with your parents?
Yeah, but it's all right, they're gay.
I couldn't care less about what people do, as long as they don't do it in public.
Shots you got, and those knocks you got, and those blues you got, from that blues you got, and those pains you got, the dirty brains you got, from those little radios.
It's my right to lead my sex life without answering to anybody.
Mark Crowley's hilarious play, The Boys in the Band, is now a movie. It's not a musical.
There's one in every city. One place where, for a few hours, they forget the whispers behind their backs and share the one secret that makes them different.
He's like waiting like the fall to go into the ballroom scene. With every glance, another dream, and visions of a royal ball. He joins the endless lines to face the mirrored walls, to find a place to rest his head. Searching as the take your love but never call. Why be left alone in bed? Let me show you to the bar.
Got to hear the soundtrack. So Boys in the Band was 1970. The screenplay was by Mark Crowley, who was gay, in answer to your earlier question. All the actors played the role from the initial off-Broadway production, and it's cited as a milestone in the history of queer cinema, as one of the first major American movies to revolve around gay characters. This was a fascinating tidbit that I'm sure you're going to want to know. Michael's apartment was inspired by the Upper East Side apartment of Tammy Grimes, a personal friend of Mark Crowley. And the actual apartment interior would not allow for filming given the size and other technical factors, so a replica was built on the Chelsea Studio soundstage. But most of the patio scenes were filmed at Tammy Ryan's home. That is something that you need to know. So one of the interesting things, well, so what did you think about those pairings? And then I'll tell you what I think. Peter.
Yeah, I haven't seen that trailer for Boys in the Band. It just, I mean, particularly after the last 4 or 6 that we saw, it's just so, despite how swishy and stereotyped and all of that, and despite how upsetting a lot of the dialogue in the movie is and the self-hatred and all that, the trailer is actually such a breath of fresh air. It's just so joyful, and I was just really surprised. It just felt quite accepting and charming and funny and tongue-in-cheek, and I don't know, I thought that was very surprising.
And it's back on Broadway.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Oh yeah, that's right.
He's putting it up right now, but it's not up already. I think this month.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it holds up, because one of the interesting things is that the play was 1968, and the film was 1970. And what happened in between? Stonewall. So that's right. So what worked in one way on the stage suddenly has a completely different resonance on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, it just wasn't coy. It's like this is who these people are. These are their lives. It wasn't trying to tease for a general interest audience. It was just basically, that's what was striking about it. Whereas even the second one, was very much about, it's so shocking we can't show you.
Titillating.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that Mark Crowley said in the Celluloid Closet documentary is, because he got flack for the depiction, and he said, but all of those characters are me. So he identified with each of the various men. Michael, what do you think?
Oh, I was just thinking about the boys-girls differences, and this doesn't hold perfectly true, but I do think it's kind of interesting that the lesbian films tend to show more isolated couples, and the boys' films tend to be, especially, I think, Victim compared to the Children's Hour, and then like the Fox compared to, I don't know what we can compare the Fox to, but Boys in the Band, and even the next one where there were a couple girls in that bar, but it was mostly men. That seems to be, it's like if you're looking at gay men, you're looking at a community, and if you're looking at women, you're looking at an isolated couple in an apartment, except of course for Sister George, where they even, that's notorious or famous for having used a real lesbian bar in London with some of the patrons as extras, and so. But I think it's kind of an interesting difference.
I think boys versus girls, in contrast, girls sexual, boys campy, like fun, silly. But something that unites the two for me is that none of them are threatening to straight men, because the lesbian couple that's secluded up in the cabin in Canada, like when a man shows up, that can be undone. So even if it excludes him for a moment, he can show up and fix at least one of them. Thank God we could save her. And then for the boys, like they're silly and short, they're thin and goofy. They're not going to take the woman I want. That woman wants a real man like me. So it's still not a challenging representation to what they would have thought.
That's
was
a good
threatening.
Yeah.
And that's what makes up the boards of these movies in 1968.
That's a good point, because it's like they give so much promo time to the most fairy-ish character, who's actually not one of the main characters in the movie, as I recall. He isn't.
Right.
But he's like all over the trailer.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that's interesting about that, so Cliff Gorman, who played that role, it kind of ruined his career, because he was so good that everyone assumed he was a Nellie Queen, and he was absolutely not. But he wouldn't get cast. He played Lenny in the Lenny Bruce play when it was on Broadway, released in New York. But going back to the Fox for a second, am I allowed to spoil the ending? Do we all know how it ends? I know you're gonna all rush out and get the DVD. Well,
You have to say timber.
yeah, right. We'll just reenact it by saying timber. Yeah, because, something's gotta give. Yeah, so the tree falls on poor sandy dust. Oh, it's heartbreaking.
So Jim, what is Some of My Best Friends Are? What is that? I mean, it is. And the preview doesn't really tell you.
Well, that's,
I mean, is it a documentary? Is it a drama?
No, I think it's a drama. It's, I think it's all shot in a local Greenwich Village gay bar, the Blue Jay, and they're celebrating Christmas Eve. And that's really all I know about it. I don't think I've ever seen it. Does anybody? But what I thought was interesting about the trailer, as Peter pointed out, we see nothing. We just have titillating prose saying whatever, and that's supposed to sell the film. Michael.
Just a personal comment about Boys in the Band is that I saw that when I was in high school, and I had seen the trailer before seeing the movie. So, I wasn't quite ready for the movie being what it was. And I saw it the week before. I saw another movie that you have up there, Myra Breckenridge. And
that's coming up next.
And the thing is that there was such a contrast, it's like I was totally depressed after seeing Boys in the Band. And after seeing Myra, I thought, well, gee, maybe instead of being one of the boys in the band, I could be Myra.
Well, that's a perfect segue, except that I want to tell you my Boys in the Band story. So it was one of the very first films that I saw when I came to San Francisco, and I saw it at the Times Theater on Stockton. Is anybody old enough to remember that really cheesy sticky floors and some? And I think I'm still warped from the experience.
I got to talk too about that moment in time as burgeoning queer hippies here in San Francisco coming out in 1970. Boys in the Band was horrible. It doesn't have to be that way. That's not who we are. It was a whole new moment.
So, meaning it was good for the gays or bad for the gays?
No, it was. I agree. Hey, Solomon, hi. The timing was incredible that it came a year after Stonewall, and most of the people I knew had a lot of antipathy towards it. So
Fine, you were out in public, but it's not how it's not how we are.
Well, and I was so new, I thought, oh my God, which one of these people do I have to choose to be my role model? Because obviously I had to choose one of them. I'm still working on it.
I was living in Manhattan at the time, and I saw the play there, and I saw the film there. Stonewall had happened, and there was this divide, because I was young, and I was meeting a lot of people, and there were a lot of older gay men who seemed to be in this film. At that time, one of the things that if you wanted to say something really derogatory about something, you'd say, "Oh, that's so 50s." And that's what I felt, and what a lot of people felt, that it was what was going on, but things are changing. And there were gay parades, pride parades in Manhattan.
Yeah, it was really a demarcation. 69 we know, but even, do you have any recollections of how the stage version and the film resonated?
I think they're basically the same, otherwise the film is more filmic.
Yeah, so same script, same cast.
The thing is, once again, is that after Stonewall, it sort of allowed it to get made.
Yeah.
I mean, so it,
I have a question for the people who saw it back then. Was there a sense, like, okay, so you reject it to a certain extent, but was there a sense of like, oh, we have to support this because this is the first?
No.
No, it was just like, it's crap.
No, it was
Let's
considered
move on.
people I knew very cool to put it down.
Okay.
But I think we secretly were happy to have something that was so gay. It was on the screen, it got a lot of attention, so.
Scotty, what were you saying?
Yeah, I remember seeing the play before the thing, and this was in the Midwest, in Omaha, and actually they couldn't show it in Omaha, they showed it across the river in the woods, basically. It was a terrible theater.
Watch out for the trees.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the gay people were impressed that it wasn't a play or a movie about where gay is a victim of some outsiders or a victimizer that's killing somebody. And it was much more three-dimensional and realistic from our standpoint back then, because a lot of the people were like that.
Well, that's a really good point, because rather than it coming blackmail from the outside or the girl telling the secret, it was internalized homophobia that was being depicted. So that's even scarier because it's from the inside.
Well, I was just going to say, the title of your evening was, misrepresentations. So the idea of, when you finally see someone that represents you, but there's only a few possibilities for being as opposed to a multiplicity of possibilities for identity. So, I mean, it's kind of like, whatever your minority is that is rarely represented in the mainstream media, you're still only given these choices.
Pick one.
Yeah, and then, but wait, none of them fit.
Right.
And that, I've always felt that difficulty, about, what do you, what do you want to come out to? And but not, it's like, I don't want to be at that party. I might want to be the actor playing that role, which I think was part of the excitement, and it still sort of is. I think that's true for Mark too. I mean, if you're in the theater and you're able to do all this finally, in the open, and they have a big production and a show, and so for the performers it's great, but in a way for the public it's still, you're still, I mean, I just have grown up, I remember that film, I never saw it, back, because I was just a kid, but, I just remember there's always been resentment towards boys in the band.
Yeah.
It's also interesting to see what celebrity gets to be the queer one in any of these movies, because I can hope for the rest of my life that Audrey Hepburn liked women. I can cut my bangs short above my eyebrows and pray. But it's going to happen today. But Audrey Hepburn doesn't get to be the aggressive lesbian. She's the one that, oh, no, isn't. And in the movie about the fox, the woman who, maybe it's a personal preference, is more attractive to me personally. She doesn't get flattened by a tree, I'm pretty sure. She gets a man.
But Sandy Dennis has longer hair.
Oh, well,
so what is that?
I don't know what but, so yeah, thanks, Sandy. But Sandy doesn't have eyebrows. Again, this is personal, but it's interesting to see where it stops, because the representation can be there, but Audrey Hepburn is not the one that's going to instigate it. She's the first one out on Moon River trying to get away from the woman
But
that's chasing.
there have been no women directors or producers.
Well,
Ever.
do I have to answer for that? Yikes.
It is.
Yeah.
Right.
I just, my parents saw the play in Boston right after it did a national tour after it closed on Broadway, and they had a best of Broadway series, and we got in a big fight because they usually took me, but they explicitly would not take me to that. And when I had a bit of a hissy fit.
And that's why they didn't take it.
No,
so how old would you have been?
15.
Oh, see, it would have damaged you, probably.
Too late.
My mom said specifically, it's not a musical, it's about homosexuals, and you wouldn't want to go see that, would you?
That was a retort.
Yeah, but the other thing was, just also, that's of the, even of just the trailers you've shown tonight, that's actually the first one where I noticed any people of color, the singer.
Yes,
Bernard.
exactly.
He's an awfully fun character.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because these are pretty white. Warren, and then let's move on.
Okay, of the two, Boys in the Band and some of my best friends are, I can remember Boys in the Band because I think it was a well-made film, but I didn't see Some of My Best Friends Are, and that was from what, 73?
71.
71.
So just the next year.
Oh, okay, because I was thinking, I remember it, but I don't, it was one of these films that I don't want to see that. And I was sort of in my mind thinking it's sort of like the blaxploitation films that were happening in the 70s. This was sort of like a gay exploitation film.
Yeah, and again, positioned as sort of almost a pseudo-documentary or social issue film. Let us warn you about the evils that are lurking.
Yeah, there were a lot of more interesting films at that period of time.
And this is one of them. Maybe.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, what you've all been waiting for, the man killer.
The moment of truth has finally arrived.
The book that couldn't be written is now a motion picture that couldn't be made. Myra Breckenridge.
I'll be right with you, boys. Get your resumes out.
Memo to Flagler, attorneys. Dear Charlie. God, that feels real good. Hey, what's your name, honey?
I'm Myra Breckenridge. You have a lot to learn. All you men have a lot to learn. And I've taken it upon myself to teach you. I'm the widow of your late nephew, Myron, and I've come to collect $500,000. Myron's mother said, with her dying breath, go to your Uncle Buck and you tell that son of a bitch that I've got a copy of the will and I want my share to go to you.
You realize when you cut it off, it won't go back.
Great bunch of boys here. Of course, you get the occasional weirdo, like anywhere, but greatest bunch of kids in Hollywood.
You have all the kinky angles that are in right now. I mean, have you any that I don't know about? Oh, Letitia, what about studs? They don't call you the queen of the casting couch for nothing. How should a man act?
You should ball chicks, that's how.
Let's just have a nice, girly evening, and I'll tell you how I lost my virginity. You tell me how you lost yours.
If only you were a man.
You can't tell the wolf from Little Red Riding Hood these days.
Because this Myra Breckenridge is more than a match for most men.
Don't miss the most sensational scene in the history of the screen.
Not there.
Am I a boy or a girl?
Can't tell from here.
Myra Breckenridge is a dish. And don't you ever forget it. Here I come!
Everything you've heard about Myra Breckenridge is true. In a world of men and women, George Jorgensen was neither.
Your glands are secreting far more female hormones than male.
He was a woman trapped in the body of a man. And there was only one escape.
Christine Jorgensen with the world's first sex change operation. He couldn't make it as a man. Could he make it as a woman?
Hey, Christine! Is it true you're gonna re-enlist in the wax? What's the matter? Aren't you gonna talk?
Chris,
How about a statement?
stop being afraid.
The Christine Jorgensen story. The first man to become a woman.
How about that score? Whoa. So, anything about the representation? They're both 1970. Myra Breckenridge, of course, is based on Gore Vidal's 68 novel, and Christine Jorgensen is based on her 67 autobiography. Okay, here's another tidbit that you're really going to want to take home and wow. At the San Francisco premiere of Myra Breckenridge, the White House demanded that footage from Shirley Temple's 1937 film Heidi be removed because she was a U.S. ambassador. It was disrespectful. So, that's important. Well, so one thing I noticed is that so it's both male to female transsexuals, but in one it's played by a female actor, and the other character is played by a male actor. So,
Which one was it?
yeah, that, Rex Reed, never mind. Any thoughts about the depiction of transgender?
Well, it seems that Myra Breckenridge seemed very, like it was much more sex positive just in general, and then this one, and then Christine Jorgensen is just against like this incredibly repressive and awful society, and that seemed to be represented by almost like by the filmmakers as well. To distance themselves from that kind of. Even though they're supposedly telling the truth, it's more like this pulp ripped from today's headlines.
Right.
And very scary and unfortunate.
Yeah, to be avoided at all costs.
That's what I would think.
As opposed to going to Hollywood and hanging out with Mae West.
Well, it's interesting because having seen a lot of the documentary footage of Christine Jorgensen, it's so much more positive. I mean, it's like, there weren't like heckling crowds. I mean, she lived off that exchange
Right.
and made a whole showbiz career out of it very successfully, and you don't get that at all.
No, it's really, well, and one of the things we haven't really talked about, but the relationship between these trailers and the actual film. How do the trailers either represent or misrepresent the whole film? Because they don't really care. They just want you to buy a ticket and that's it. So whether it accurately represents what you're going to see is immaterial. Scotty.
There was a lot of confusion in the early days before Christine Jorgensen, because you would have men dress as women. They could be transvestites, straight men. They could be gay men who wanted to pick up other men, or they could be what we think of as a transsexual today, which really wasn't too much recognized because you couldn't change your sex. I remember the first transsexual I met, and I knew him before and after, and he would go to the gay bars and he'd say, "I'm a straight man," because he was married. And he says, "But I want to be a woman." And all the gay people would say, "Well, all you have to do is put on a dress and lift your legs." You know, then you're a woman, you're a girl. But he had the sex change, and he stayed married to his wife. He says, "I'm not a homosexual and never have been. I've always enjoyed being married to a woman." And that was really confusing to the gay people back then, because they thought, I thought you wanted to be a woman so you could go with a man. And that was not well understood back in the 50s and the early 60s.
Or even by the filmmakers of this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I remember seeing Christine Jorgensen's story at a drive-in. I was probably 15 or 16, and I knew it was bad, but maybe for the wrong reasons. But to Sky's point, I remember getting Transgender 101 from Susan Stryker, and how one's gender and one's object choice are totally different. So, I mean, it doesn't mix and match. So your point is well taken. But something you said earlier, Patrick, made me think of the Danish Girl. So how have things changed in however many decades that is? Okay, I'm going to come out and say I hated the Danish Girl. I hated every frame of it because I thought they didn't, it was homosexuality, lesbianism, intersex, transvestism, transsexualism, and fashion fetishism, all thrown into the same Cuisinart. I thought there was I didn't understand what that film was about.
Sure was pretty.
Spoken like a true gay man.
Yeah, the sad thing is that character became less and less interesting the more she embraced her transgender status. As a character, she was written more interestingly as a tormented artist, and then of course she goes through this transition and then gives up being an artist and gives up frankly becoming interesting other than sort of longingly petting her skirts.
Her yeah, that's the
yeah. So
and it was so historically disrespectful. I mean, the actual historical narrative is so much more interesting than, of course, as usual, a Hollywood depiction.
Question about Christine Jorgensen's story. How widely was that distributed? Because, I mean,
well, I saw it at the drive-in in the suburb of LA. It must have been fairly wide, even if it was just the B picture on a double bill.
You were joking about the score, but the fact of it having this huge original score and distributed by United Artists, which at the time was a pretty major player in Hollywood, this was a very mainstream film.
Huh. So probably wide.
I don't know if it did well.
That's
and I've never seen the film, so I don't know if the trailer, does justice or it's better.
Or injustice.
Yeah, injustice.
That might be related before I go on. I don't want
You can go with
to. Just the score. We have as soon as you turn on the lights, you said, what about that score? And I thought back to Anything Goes. And the attitude of Anything Goes is just like, well, we're fucked either way. Like, we might as well just let it happen, because if black is white and day is night and grandma's out at the club dancing with the gigolos, like, it's just what we have. But this one was not that. This is someone who couldn't make it as a man,
Right.
So it's just this ultimate form of limbo. It's not anything goes, the boys are gonna party, we might as well take some pictures. This is someone who is so in the limbo between anything that they could be, they're not even a person anymore.
So one is expansive, the Cole Porter, Anything Goes, and the other is way constricted.
Absolutely, and it's a far more uneasy score.
Good point.
It's like Jawsy.
The director of the film is Irving Rapper, who directed Now Voyager and a lot of films in the 40s.
So that's where he was coming from. Now Voyager.
So let's go on to the final category, which is bisexuality. So let's do...
We're free to do what we want.
Other people often do what they don't want to do too.
A new film from the Academy Award-winning director of Midnight Cowboy, Sunday, Bloody Sunday.
should never have said yes to this weekend.
Okay, I know you're not getting enough of me, but you're getting all there is.
Perhaps you're spreading yourself a little thin.
Alex.
Me being careful not to ask you about Daniel. Daniel, nothing answers from you because you're here. I've had this business. Anything is better than nothing. There are times when nothing has to be better than anything.
I told you, it'll have to be your choice. Sunday. Bloody Sunday. And do you love him?
Well, thank you, sir.
A new film by John Schlesinger.
Conrad is young and ambitious and attractive. Everyone likes Conrad, or hates him, or loves him, or needs him, or wants him.
Do I know you or your father or any of your family?
No, ma'am. I'm new here.
And you want to work for me?
And Conrad is important to each of them. Because Conrad has something for everyone.
I love watching you.
You do?
You're thinking all the time, aren't you? I can see it behind those eyes. Click, tick, click, click, tick, click. Shall I do it this way, or that way, or that way? Shameless, outrageous, and utterly immoral.
You are going to stay, aren't you? I mean, there's not much here. Just mother. Nothing ever happened.
Click, tick, click, click, tick, click.
I don't know who you are, or where you come from, or what smart ideas you may have in your head.
But I don't approve of you. They only approve of murderers and paragraphs. Which are you? You remember at the station when we were leaving for the city? I said, who are you? I know now. You are the new man, the new force that's come into the world. A new world, a savage world. The world of Attila the Hun come again. And so, invader, from wherever you are, doesn't the next step seem inevitable?
Such display, my dear. One hopes you aren't overextending yourself.
Ah, silly old bitch.
Compared to them, the Macbeths were just plain folks. And the Borgias were a nice Italian family. Angela Lansbury, Michael York. Something for everyone, the basic black comedy.
Any thoughts about that? So Something for Everyone is based on a 1965 novel called The Cook by Harry Cressing. Apparently the film's plot is quite different to the novel, but I think I remember that this is a reworking of Pasolini's
Teorema.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was 68, so just...
Terence Stamp was there.
Right, Terence Stamp was the beautiful stranger. And then Sunday Bloody Sunday is 71, and again it's British, so that's a contrast. But back to your question, there was John Schlesinger, I don't know to what extent he was out, but he was a gay director. So there was a gay person behind the camera. And apparently Alan Bates was originally cast in the Peter Finch role, but didn't. I can't remember what the excuse was.
He was doing Butler.
Is that it? So any thoughts about the representation of bisexuals in these two trailers? Peter?
And maybe I'm just being generous because it's just so fun seeing these, but the Sunday Bloody Sunday, I thought, first of all, what an amazing trailer. I think it's just a beautifully made, elliptical but interesting, short little whatever 60-second thing that to me is very non-judgmental about the characters that it is teasing you about, not trying to do anything, you know, salacious or titillating, just saying these are human beings with dramas to tell. And so I thought that was really, and when I thought about 71 being the same year as one of the other ones you just showed us, and how different maybe it was the Christine Jorgensen, I mean, just very interesting to see the difference.
Yeah, I noticed that too, because in Sunday Bloody Sunday, it's really just about a triangle, and it doesn't matter who is in the triangle. It's just like it's a drag when it's not working to everybody's.
It seemed a little coy to me, in the sense of it seemed really predominantly towards the heterosexual couple.
Yeah.
And then you're getting these glimpses and.
Yeah, maybe. Seems like the film is more equally balanced, but I might be misremembering it. Yes?
My memory is seeing it in Antoinette, and I remember the gasp that was in the audience when Peter Benjamin kissed.
And where was this?
Antoinette.
Not even America.
I was just going to say that I was struck by the voiceover of the trailer narration, and I thought Sunday Bloody Sunday was really going back to that sort of ominous, I don't know, the voice sounded really ominous to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other voice is just, that was very much in Something for Everyone was very much like Myra Breckenridge's. This is going to be, like a carnival sideshow riot, you know, sort of exaggerated. I mean, they're really interesting because it's such a contrast. One is being very realist and the other is a total farce.
That's an interesting point because, well, two things. One, Sunday Bloody Sunday is 71 in British compared to Victim, which is 61 in British with the same ominous voiceover. So in that sense, not much changed in 10 years. But then if you look back, if you look at Something for Everyone, Myra Breckenridge, Boys in the Band, they're all pretty light, I guess, for lack of a better word, campy. They look like more fun, whether or not sitting through them would be fun or not.
Yeah, I didn't take that voiceover of Sunday Bloody Sunday as being ominous. I thought it was very much in the mode of the art house trailer of the time. That's how you would have heard American releases of Bergman films, Fellini films. It was we want to take this serious, and that's why they tag it. They begin it with from the director of Midnight A Midnight Cowboy, which of course was infamous as X-rated, but it was a seriously considered art film. So I thought it was actually making you like puff up a little bit and say, oh, this is a serious film for adults. It's a sexual revolution, but we're not going to trivialize these relationships. That's how I took it.
I think that's my take is, I think we're not disagreeing, but it's like when I hear that voiceover, and it totally is an art house thing, my sense, I just remember that, there was a trailer-rama at the Castro years ago, and they showed, the trailer for a Pasolini film that was just the most tedious, voiceover, ponderous and pretentious. And so I always hear that voice and think, oh, this is like a boring art house film that they don't and so they're being super serious, and maybe it's like, you don't know. It could be a total fun, really great film. It could move really fast, but you're never going to be able to tell because they have to slow it down and sell it as this is worthwhile. And so maybe that's what I'm hearing when it sounds ominous, and maybe it's also the context of watching all these trailers and hearing all this like these are two people who something bad, you know, and it's just the repetition of it is starting to work on my brain.
I was struck by Glenda Jackson's character, just that she's so much the contemporary woman, modern woman. She has so much agency just in even the few lines that she has, really, that she's very much, she's not sort of the victim of this triangle, but
she's not happy, but she's, yeah.
Yeah, I just take it totally differently. I was thinking she just looks miserable. She gets to be miserable, and Peter Finch just gets to be stoic, and Murray Hatt is having a good time. I don't know, I'm seeing it differently.
I just wanted to say that I just wanted to thank you for doing this. It's so interesting to look at trailers, like I think what you were saying, as like kind of a little art form in themselves. Because in so many, I think there's very complicated ones for Sunday Bloody Sunday, because you have this like bizarre eroticism of the telephone. You know, like you have this incredible, like, is that in the film? Where they show the inside of the wires?
I think it is, yeah.
And then, you know, she's on the phone and they're like talking, you know, it's like this, it presages phone sex. But at the same time, you know, I just think it's interesting, all of this evening, you know, to kind of, and then to see what public is it meant to, like within our own identity, when do we start to see films that were meant for somebody with a queer sensibility? You know, almost, it's not, like obviously Sister, like Christine Jorgensen was made for like, it's like a scare film.
For the transgender community.
So we
yeah.
Anyway, I
appreciate it.
I think it's successful what you've done tonight.
Well, and it's you who are the program, and it's Jenny who compiled these trailers, but I wanted to use that as a jumping off point. So the last one was 71, so that was a long time ago. How have things changed or not so much since then? Either in terms of the trailers or in terms of the representation in the films themselves. Any thoughts about that?
Well, they were different even then. You didn't show any of the Warhols, and that was very huge for me. It's like, oh, at last. None of this shit was for me. None of it. It was all for the straight people. And then Andy came on, I was like, oh, okay. I did it. This is for me. I don't remember anything else. I could define that.
That's a good point.
So I didn't care after that.
And those were, you know, a lot of America, those are hard to see.
I guess.
I mean, you were in West LA and it's easier to see things.
Sure.
Well, let's look at, all right, I'll step into it. So let's look at the contemporary depiction of homosexuality. Call Me By Your Name. How does that compare to getting so much attention? Hush.
I didn't see it.
Didn't see it.
Me either, but I think it's still a big deal, which shouldn't be. So many years when I was 2018 and like Brokeback Mountain or The Beauty and the Beast, even though this is ridiculous, it's like the most ridiculous character in the whole movie is a gay man, and yeah, it's almost like it was just 10 years after 71, not 40 years.
Right. So if I'm interpreting this correctly, not much has really changed.
No, it's a big deal and it's something weird.
Well, so I'll confess, I saw Call Me By Your Name, and then I got a text from a friend that he said, okay, I saw Call Me By Your Homophobic Name. And I couldn't have agreed more. I hated that film.
I think that the thing I would call for is the same thing most minority identity groups are calling for right now, which is that it's not going to change in a meaningful way for more people unless the people writing it or sitting on these boards are people that have that lived experience. Yeah. So I can see glimpses of things that feel like me when I watch Meryl Streep in The Hours, only sort of, and then you can piece it out from there. But then what is someone who is wheelchair bound and a lesbian who is black feel about Meryl Streep's portrayal of lesbianism. It will never be specific enough unless we have more people who are writing it.
Absolutely, and that goes back to your point of who's behind the camera, who's writing the scripts, who's making the film. And as we see at Frameline every year, more and more and more people are telling their own stories and not waiting for Hollywood to interpret them for them. Yeah.
Two films with lesbian content in the last 7 years, I think. One being The Kids Are All Right, which really pissed me off. And I was in a program, academic program that had these really, highly educated, people, but I respected them, my friends. And before I got to see the film, I was sitting with my partner, we were driving somewhere, and this friend of mine says, I really liked the film, I got to see it, but I don't know, is that how it really is for you guys? And I don't know what you're talking about yet. And then I see it, and it's about the lesbian bed death, and that they have to get off on a gay male porn, and then of course she goes and gets together with this hunk, who's the actor?
Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo, thank you. And the director is a lesbian, or at least she's bisexual, but anyway, whatever.
Yes, whatever.
I don't even know why that movie got all this critical acclaim. I just don't know. I mean, whatever. And Julianne Moore has always been really graphic sex scene. That's just been her career, right? And then the other one is Blue's the Warmest Color. It's directed by, actually, the movie kind of something, I don't know, it provoked me. It was it was a challenge, it was interesting, it moved me. And then to find out, of course, about the director being a total creep and abusing his actresses. But it was also, the 10-minute sex scene where he notoriously dismissed the writer of the graphic novel who wrote, and she said, actually, there's not that much scissoring going on in lesbian sex. And he's like, well, you must have just you're not having sex.
And let me explain it to you.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point.
Oh no, I was just going to say that the change where the changes happened has been on television, I think, and which is not that we're talking about Hollywood tonight, but I can't think of any. I'm trying to think of a film that I felt represented, that I saw myself in, and there's still nothing. Mm-hmm. There's films I enjoyed. I guess that's the difference. Like Bound, but that was entertainment. I mean, that's basically like seeing a queer version of a really entertaining gangster film. So, with the benefit of actually having somebody who about lesbian sex consulting.
Did you think of one?
Go Fish.
Yeah.
That's way independent. So that's.
Yeah.
Michael, what were you thinking?
Sort of a different point. I have an article about Michael Greer this week.
Yes, it was wonderful. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Don't miss it.
In this week's BAR. And one of the things that Brokeback Mountain, if you can wrap your head around comparing Brokeback Mountain to The Gay Deceivers, is that The Gay Deceivers and Fortune in Men's Eyes basically sort of destroyed Michael Greer's film career. And there was all of this talk when Brokeback Mountain came out about how daring this was for, I mean, and it's sort of like, not really.
Not really.
Yeah.
It's also still a genre of tragedy. Like, you can see moments of it that feel empowering or good, maybe hopeful, watching Carol, you going, maybe, but then it goes awry. Like, it's never good, and even if there's any moments of, it could be good, or that could be it, for a minute, death, or someone gets killed by a tree, or someone gets thrown off a road, or someone ending up having to stay in Canada. They're not all the same. They're not all the same. They're very fortunate right now. Just bitter about a visa problem, but it's still a genre of tragedy, and that's really sad. That's hard to grow up with, no matter if it's now or then.
Right, I think that's a good point. So, not that these handful of trailers are indicative of anything except what they're advertising, but they give us a glimpse, I think, into where we've been, who we are, what did and didn't get represented. So, any last thoughts before we land the plane board?
Yeah, I also did not like Call Me By Your Name.
Oh, good.
I've been calling it the name that dare not speak its name.
Yes, that's good.
And you know, it was just very retrograde and all of that. And I was thinking about recent films that I've seen that have gotten a lot of acclaim, like Carol and Moonlight. And the characters had problems in those films, but one of the problems was not their sexuality, you know, whereas in Call Me By Your Name, everybody seemed to be having problems with their sexuality.
Well, I didn't even know what that movie was about. Was it about lust or love or, anyway, that's not good. Peter, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, I think, you know, to the point that particularly representation of queer women and trans characters and voices, that almost by definition, the larger, bigger budgeted world of whether we call it Hollywood or mainstream film production around the world, they've been left out for the most part. And so it's great that we have television and now, you know.
And web series.
And web series, and such a
where-
multiplicity of voices. And that said, I still think we are in a total golden age of a diversity of queer characters and stories on screen. We can all quarrel with whether we like a film like Call Me By Your Name or Moonlight or whatever, but I mean the fact that these films are getting out there and acclaim and they're beautifully made, even if we don't like their politics or whatever it might be, I just still think, and I will celebrate this by saying that the best queer film I saw in the last 12 months still hasn't even opened yet. It's coming in about 2 weeks. It's called A Fantastic Woman. It's a Chilean drama that front and center is a transgender woman, played by a transgender actress from Chile, and it's an amazing film because it is just her story, irrespective, in some ways irrespective of her journey to becoming a transgender person. It's really just about what happens to her when she loses somebody close in her life, and it's to me it's a breakthrough in the way that Moonlight was kind of an aesthetic breakthrough.
I think that's a perfect note on which to end this. Thank you, Peter, for giving us hope for the future. And thank you all for participating.